Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the first video episode of my new blog, Another Song is Possible. We're recording this for Telesort English. And Another Song is Possible looks at the intersections between folk music, radical politics, art and culture, and social change. And so what I try to do is write about, interview, record, and hang out with musicians that are on that cultural front, on the social front, often who are also involved on the political front of trying to change the world and make this place a better place. So today, I'm really glad to have Shannon Murray here, an old friend of mine. We've both been part of the riot-folk collective for the last decade, decade. We're here in my basement, and we're hanging out. And she's going to share some songs with us, and she's going to talk about the tour that she's on and what she's been up to. So what's up, Shannon?
Hi, Ryan.
So why don't you talk about first, like, I don't know, tell me about what you do. Tell me about your life, your music, and all of that.
I'm living out in the woods in Bemidji, and I adopted a few kids 3 years ago, so I'm a full-time single mom, playing music, working a day job, keeping super busy in my community.
Dang. So single mom on tour right now. And how often right now are you on tour?
I tour pretty minimally. I'm home a lot with my babies.
And tell me about when you tour. Like, how do you structure your tours? You organize your tours yourself? You stay at people's houses? Like, tell us about that world.
Yeah, I've been going out on like 2.5 week long tours. This is my third one since last fall. So going out on a little loop usually from Minnesota. I went out west, I went down south, and now I'm out in the northeast. I guess we're in Baltimore, so we're kind of not in the north yet, are we?
No,
technically. East and northeast. Setting everything up myself. I've met a lot of new people, have some old contacts from before when I toured full-time, which is great. And yeah, just doing it all myself, sleeping on strangers' couches, sleeping in gas station parking lots. It's a glorious lifestyle.
And where have you been performing at mostly, or is it all different? Tell me about some of the spots. And
it's all really different. I don't know if it ends up that way or if I'm the architect of that. I played in a UU church the other night, playing in basements, playing at schools, playing at colleges, playing at info shops, bookstores, coffee shops, everywhere that will let me play.
Cool.
Senior centers, you know,
all right.
Elementary schools, lots of fun, different places.
Dang, okay, the whole thing. That's cool. So why don't you talk musically? You're in the punk folk genre, by choice or not. That's where you've fallen. I sympathize. But tell me about like some of your influences, both obviously as a musician, as a solo acoustic artist, also as a political activist, as a feminist, as a labor historian. Like, tell me about the different things that motivate you to do what you're doing.
Yeah, I guess that's a lot of hats that you name there. I wear a lot of hats. I guess I started out playing music really late in life. I grew up in a super small town. I'd never seen a woman with a guitar playing her own music ever, outside of like going to church when I was a really little kid. So it was really alienating to me. And then I went to this open mic night and saw this gal playing, and it just totally blew my mind, and I started playing. So most of my influences early on were people in my hometown, or I guess not my hometown now currently. I live in Bemidji. And there's a lot of really great musicians there, and those folks really inspired me. I was pretty ignorant of what was going on in the world out there. I felt kind of oh goodness, what's the word? Where you don't fit in.
Sure.
Because I was playing political music, so I'd go to the open mic night and sing this song about like the Jane Collective in Chicago, like talk about this underground abortion organization, and people it was weird, right? And then I started traveling and playing music, and actually you were the first person who made me feel less like a freak and a weirdo, and that there was community out there and I could connect with those sorts of spaces. So that was sort of the beginning, and so my influences early on were rural Minnesota musicians, I guess. I don't know. And books, lots of books.
What kind of books?
And angst. I guess the autobiography of Malcolm X and Howard Zinn's People's History were the first two books that really, I was like, whoa, this is important, and it spoke to something. But I've always been really political in my own way, like growing up in a small town and being really different and being a girl in a community that had very specific ideas about what that meant, and it wasn't my ideas, and kind of being like shoved into this little box and always rebelling and trying to do things differently. Yeah, I've always been that kid, so I don't know where that came from. Since birth, I was born that way. But yeah, I guess.
And tell me a bit about we'll get into talking about like the IWW, and maybe we can hook that in through talking about Bemidji. But tell me about Bemidji. Like, you're up north. Tell people what's like what's the deal in northern Minnesota. Yeah.
It's cold. No, it's I live in a really great arts community. So it's small, it's rural, it's out in the woods, but there are a lot of artists, visual artists, musicians, a lot of great theater. So it doesn't feel so small sometimes. But yeah, grew up. That's where I grew up. That's where I'm from. Is that what you were asking?
Sure.
Paul and Babe live there. That's exciting. With a big statue.
And Bemidji had the so you've been working on some songs recently, like rehashing some old Industrial Workers of the World songs. Ever since I met you, you've been singing about the IWW, which is cool because obviously a lot of like folk music, radical folk music references to IWW. I think you're doing it in a specific way, and you're punking it up and you're pulling from it, but you're also doing like research about it, and you've been doing these projects recently where you've been actually doing research in order to write songs specifically. And you told me that Bemidji was the first place that the anti-IWW legislation was utilized. What was that?
In Minnesota. Yeah, it was the first conviction, and it might have been the first conviction in the whole country. I can't say that with any certainty, but it happened shortly after all that legislation was passed. It was pretty quick.
And for those who don't know, the Industrial Workers of the World is still and was in its heyday in the early 1900s fairly large radical anarchist and socialist union, largely comprised of migrant workers in the West and of factory workers in the East. Definitely led some very major strikes that had really large ramifications in like the U.S. labor movement. They didn't always get credit for it, but they were like the underground, the underbelly of the labor movement. Also, the only union of their time that openly accepted anybody regardless of race or gender or anything like this, except if you were an owner of business and industry. So sorry about that. Tell me about those projects that you've been doing recently.
Yeah, so it all started out, I was reading Rise Up Singing, like in bed, and I found the Hallelujah I'm a Bum song, and the lyrics were hilarious, and I still identified with them. It's like a 100-year-old song, and it was relevant to me. And I started playing it, and of course I was playing it wrong because I had no idea where the song even came from. And then I went to graduate school for clarinet performance, which was horrible, right? But I did this research project there, like a small research project, and started learning more about the union. And then when I dropped out of school and went on tour, I was playing those songs. And then recently, the local librarian, actually, like librarians are awesome, convinced me to do an hour-long presentation with slides and talk about the history. And that's where I found out about all this history in Bemidji. And I found out that my grandpa's dad and his uncle were both card-carrying members of the IWW, which was really cool for me to feel that connection that I don't always feel ever in my family. That a few generations back that they were like me and had similar ideas and similar aims for their community. So that was pretty cool. So this month I've been doing a few shows at universities for Women's History Month. I got convinced to do an hour-long presentation and focus on the women in the IWW movement, which has been really exciting and really challenging to find information about a lot of these women's lives. And there isn't a whole lot of music that was written about them at the time, so I've had to write a lot of songs, which is, it's fun. It's not a bad job, right? To read books and write songs.
Can you tell me about some of the women that you researched or some of the stories?
Yeah, so I did some more research on Mother Jones, who I'd already read quite a bit about. She's probably one of my favorites. Lucy Parsons, Elizabeth Gurley Flynn, Helen Keller. So yeah.
Cool. And so you're tell me about this album that you're constructing, and then maybe we can talk about also this other album that you're working on and what you're up to and when you're going to be touring again and where people can start to hear some of your new stuff.
Yeah, so I want to put all these songs that I've been working on and writing into an album. There's a lot of great things I found. I found this really amazing poem called Sedition by this guy, Evan Vance Cook, that's about, similar to what that trial happened in Bemidji, people were being put in jail for distributing books. And so he wrote this really beautiful poem about that, and I set that to music. So kind of finding all these gems and just bringing new life to them, playing them faster than most people maybe want me to play them. I get to decide how fast it goes. And yeah, so I'm excited to record it and make it accessible. A lot of folks, my generation, younger than me, older than me, there's like this disconnect. We don't understand. I didn't understand things like where the 8-hour day came from, where child labor laws came from, that all these people worked very hard to make those gains, died for it, went to prison for it. So it's cool to connect with that history and to be able to share it with other folks. Yeah.
Cool. And then so you're also working on another new album of your original stuff. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so it sometimes feels like the music is really disconnected, but I think it's all connected. The album I'm working on is a lot more personal. I kind of went through some really difficult stuff a few years ago and stopped playing music altogether and started playing roller derby and destroying my body and healing at the same time. It was a really interesting thing. And I started playing music again and started writing about that stuff. So this album is really about that process for me of like working through some hard stuff and how it's affecting my life and my relationships. And it's very personal, political sort of writing.
Cool. And so maybe to wrap us up, why don't you talk about like how do you see that intersection between personal and political in your music as an artist? Like your music definitely goes from, one song will be like hyper externally political, maybe telling a story that's not from your life or that is, and then the next one could be a love song and stuff, and you stack them up really nicely, and it's I feel like your albums you definitely get to know you. And I don't know whether that's intentional or if it's accidental, but it's obviously that's part of your process. Why don't you talk about that and talk about like, I don't know what it's like to be in your shoes right now, following in that folk tradition.
Yeah, I think the way I write, it's really unintentional, but it's the only way I know how to express myself. Like if I can't connect with something, and I end up telling a lot of personal stories that connect with movements for social justice. Like I actually was doing some research on Woody Guthrie and for this class, and the class was on gender, and we were supposed to talk about how our gendered experience was similar to someone else. And I found out that his family, they had a fire, his house burnt down, and his mom lost her daughter, their youngest child, in the fire, and then his dad was like financially ruined. And that experience completely mirrored my experience as a child. We had a fire, my dad was financially ruined, my mom had a miscarriage, and the expectations that they had in society and were everything was leveled. They were destroyed by that, and it affected my whole family on a very personal level. Not having money and my parents fighting over not having money, like growing up really poor, like all of that affects our interpersonal relationships with each other. So it's not, I can't take it apart. It's just all very intimately connected. I don't know if that.
Yeah, no, for sure. So to in final words, when's your next tour? When's your next music coming out? And where can people hear more of your stuff right now?
I'm headed
Since the Riot-folk website has turned into a Japanese dating website, which used to be where you could download your music. Where do they go now?
I have a website, shannonmurraymusic.com, and I'm on Facebook and all those sorts of things. I'm going to be heading up to New York tomorrow, and I'm rehearsing with my buddy. He's going to drum on my album. I'm going to record in a couple of weeks. I'm getting in the studio, so I should have new music out in a couple of months here. And I don't know when my next tour is. I got to sit down with the children. We decide everything together, so look at a calendar. But probably next fall I'll be out again. And I'm playing shows intermittently here and there. So
cool. And you're gonna share a song or two with us now, which
Sure.
will be cool. So we will get reorganized here in the studio, and then we'll be back with Shannon Murray.
Here I am collecting anchors, tethered to the places I most fear. And this feeling is akin to drowning, but I don't know if I want out of here, but I gotta get out of here. voice inside my head, it's pounding. I can't seem to think of anyone but you. And I've grown accustomed to being alone in my head, but I'd rather be in there with you. Yeah, I'd rather be in there with you. And nobody ever asked me. And nobody ever did. Oh, 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 no, nobody ever asked me if I could open up wide and feel like this. I don't wanna feel like this. I don't wanna feel like this. And every time you're getting too close, you're too close, there I go, I push you away. And I'd offer up to you this heart, dear, if it wasn't also screaming no fucking way. Don't you come near me, I'm so far from okay. Yeah, I am so far from okay. And nobody ever asked me. And nobody ever did. Oh, 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 no, nobody ever asked me if I could open up wide and feel like this. I don't wanna feel like this. I don't wanna feel like this. And here I